Welcome everybody once again to Kraken Cast Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk to creatives all over the industry, from streamers to developers. And today we'll actually be talking to the Elder Scrolls Online art director, CJ Grebb, talking about art, his path in art, and the art of Elder Scrolls. So without further ado, thank you so much for being here today, CJ.
A pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time, and just kind of want to get into the interview a little bit, just kind of start off getting to know you a bit. So one of the things we talk about here is the journey. We talk about how things are about the journey, not necessarily the destination. So could you talk a little bit about the journey that kind of led to you becoming the art director for ESO?
Ironically, that's always what I write in wedding books. You know, when you're supposed to sign the wedding book, it's the journey, not the destination. That's true. Sorry. Say the question again. I was caught up in my own narcissism.
That's fine. It is a very Hallmark card expression, but it resonates with me. It's the Hallmark card that resonates with me. I was asking kind of about your journey, just kind of if you talk a little bit about the path that led to you eventually becoming the art director for ESO.
So, I got out of college with a degree in graphic design. I thought I was going to be like a layout guy, newspapers or web page layout or something like that. Although I got out of college in '96, so this is quite a while ago. This is when the web was really just getting started. You know, it was in its infancy, and newspapers were still a thing, and so was magazine layout. So that's what I thought I was going to do. I moved up from Virginia to Washington D.C. with a couple of college friends, and we all started immediately looking for jobs. I answered an ad, and I kid you not, a classified ad in the Washington Post. A small little games company in Fairfax, Virginia, was looking for artists, and I said, "Well, that sounds cool, right? That sounds better than typesetting." So I put my portfolio in the car and drove off to Fairfax and interviewed with Matt Firer and Mark Jacobs and Rob Denton, who were the people who started up Mythic Entertainment, and that led to a job there, and I did a lot of fun work with them. Eventually, we did Dark Age of Camelot, which turned out to be our hit game. The company went through the roof. We got bought by EA. We did Warhammer Online. And, you know, eventually the company started to kind of peter out. I think the writing was on the wall that after a lot of success, the company was not going to, you know, subsist in the EA pantheon anymore. And I was getting ready to send my portfolio out there again and try to find another job. And I contacted Matt Firer, who had left Mythic just before EA bought us. Basically, when EA bought us, Matt Firer said, "No, I'm not. He didn't want to work for the big corporate machine, so he went off and did his own thing, and eventually hooked up with Bethesda." And was working on a secret game. We all knew he was working on a secret game. Nobody knew what it was. But I sent him an email saying, "Hey, I'm putting myself out there again. Would you mind writing me a recommendation letter?" At Mythic, I had been co-art director on Dark Age of Camelot, and then I had moved over to the marketing side of things. I was the creative services manager for my last years there, and I was expecting to stay in that realm. It's creative services is like screenshots and videos and just general marketing and public relations support. And it turned out that Matt was ramping up the marketing side of things for Elder Scrolls Online. They needed a creative services person, and he brought me right over. He said, "Why don't you come work for me and do the same thing over here that you were doing at Mythic?" So it was serendipitous. And my career advice to people out there who want to get into games is find someone who's going to have 30 years of success in gaming and just basically latch on to them, much as I have to Matt Firer.
That's actually true of content creation. True, if you can latch on to those people that you can hook up with and will think about you with things. But also, I was actually not fully aware of the extent you worked on other games with Mythic. So you've worked on two games I really love, and our community actually still talks about like Dark Ages. Cool, talk about what MMO started. So Dark Age of Camelot and Warhammer and things like that come up. So you've actually been through a lot of these games that me and the people here in the community enjoy. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, really on two sides of it too, because I was co-art director. So I was a developer on Dark Age. I was not a developer when we were doing Warhammer. I was really purely a marketing artist at that stage. So I really got to see game development from two sides of the coin. You know, one where you're in the trenches and you're really working on it day by day, and you really know it's like Hamilton. You're in the room where it happens, right? You're listening to all the conversations where all the hard decisions are made, and then when you're on the marketing side, you're really only seeing it after all those decisions have been made, and you're reacting, and you're trying to pivot on whatever is happening in the games, because the games are never as glorious as they are originally envisioned, right? You always have to make cuts and you have to make sacrifices. So it's been interesting to be able to see it from both sides.
Yeah, that's awesome. Also, that gives you like a more full, it would seem, understanding of like the entire process, which I could see only benefiting no matter where you end up falling a project. And kind of speaking of the project you're working on now, being art director for Elder Scrolls Online, this kind of vast and varied world. I'm curious, what about doing design, doing art, being an art director for something like Elder Scrolls Online keeps you really excited and invested in that world? What kind of like attracts you to the world of Tamriel?
I mean, it's so deep. It's just so deep. There's an endless, a cauldron of material to grab from. You're never bored. You never do the same thing twice. We do a chapter and we do a DLC every year and 2 dungeons every year, and they're always completely different from one another, right? Like, and in new biomes and in new characters, and at the same time we get to bring characters back, so you get to play with old friends while going to new places. It's the number one thing that's great about working on something like Elder Scrolls, is just that there's so much to draw from, and there's so many cool places to go. And if you get short of ideas, all you got to do is go back and play Oblivion again, or go back and play Skyrim again, and you'll find those little bits of those little nuggets of glorious, meaty lore that you can latch onto and make a whole new adventure out of. It's never boring.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really love as a player of Elder Scrolls and the world in general that ESO gets to explore is, especially going into High Isle, there's a place on a map and there's 2 pieces of lore, and that's kind of
it, right?
All that there is. And we're going from the desolate, magical Mad Max Fargrave and the burning things, the Deadlands, to this beautiful volcanic island with sweeping fields of sunflowers. So to that extent, given that you have to work from a few pieces of lore, a piece on a map, what are the kind of challenges you face in designing in a world that's as old as Elder Scrolls? Because the first open world RPG I ever played was Daggerfall, sitting on the first PC my dad brought home in 1996. So this world is, and there was games before that, so this is a very old, like you said, world, a lot of lore. So what kind of challenges do you face kind of trying to work in a world so old?
The challenge is being a faithful shepherd. When you get put in this seat and you're in charge ostensibly of of continuing the legacy of Elder Scrolls, it's a responsibility I take seriously. Like, people love Elder Scrolls, and they love this game for very real reasons. It's not just a video game. It's been a part of their lives. They played it, they started when they were 13 and they played it till they were 33. That's an incredible legacy, and that's an incredible amount of just sort of, fandom to be responsible for. And we try very hard. I mean, we have a person whose job is lore master, right? Like, because we know how important it is that we get this stuff as right as we can, and although there are varying degrees of agreement on how right we get it, we do try very hard on the most part to get it right, and knowing that there are people out there who take it that seriously and who love this game and this world as deeply as they do, that's probably the trickiest part, is making sure that you're honoring and being a good shepherd, and not just infusing too much of your own personality into it. You're really trying to be correct to what an Elder Scrolls game should be.
Right, and that's kind of tricky in the MMO space to kind of fully capture that. And like you said, there's going to be varying degrees of agreements and disagreements, but
Yeah, and you know, we get a lot of play out of the unreliable narrator thing, which means that, you know, the people who are upset with some of the stuff we do, they're not entirely wrong, right? Like, you know, you can they have a stake in this too. Their fandom is their stake in Elder Scrolls, and so, you know, I try very hard not to be dismissive of anybody's, you know, gripes or their complaints, because it comes from a place of deep love. Almost always, it comes from a place of, I love this game so much, and you did something I was disappointed in. That's something you have to pay attention to.
Yeah, there is the benefit of the unreliable narrator, and Elder Scrolls obviously wrote themselves a couple wonderful things like dragon breaks and stuff. So that, I mean, that's what makes the lore so rich and debatable. So that's kind of must be a fun place to work from.
I love reading the Reddit threads on how many dragon breaks there really have been. It's a great discussion. You know, there are people who are dead set, I think, I mean, there's only ever been one, and there are people, well, there clearly been 10, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's been 10 or there's been one, and it makes the world feel really real, and I think that's really amazing. And obviously you play a big part in that affecting the art direction of it. And kind of speaking a little bit about art director, people might not fully be aware, because you can hear titles and not know what that entails on like a day-to-day or a month-to-month. So can you talk a little bit for people who might not know what it is an art director actually kind of does on a game like ESO?
Sure. My main job is I stay in constant communication with the people who are writing the stories and creating the content, right? So the writers and the content creators and the world builders and the people who are coming up with the storylines. And as they get agreement, and as they get alignment, and as they write and present, all right, here's what we're going to do for the next chapter, for the next dungeon, for the next DLC. My job is to make sure that all of the art that's being created in service of that story is correct, not only to, you know, the legend and to the lore of Elder Scrolls, but that the connective tissue between what they're trying to do with the story is maintained, and that manifests itself in meetings, a lot of meetings with concept teams and outsourced teams and figure teams and visual effects teams and environment teams, and they're all kind of working in concert with each other. A lot of it happens at the same time, and a lot of it happens in a series of handoffs where obviously we get a concept that goes to figure, or we get a concept that goes to environment, that gets built into 3D, it gets entered into the game. You know, as that stuff gets entered into the game, the content people are, you know, actually doing the quest building and doing the writing and doing the work of putting all that into the game so that we can play it and see what it looks like and make sure that it's right. And so really my job is to tell a lot of artists who are all vastly better artists than I am how to do their art, but not because I'm better than them, but because my job is to try to keep it all in my head at the same time and make sure that it's all servicing the story correctly.
Yeah, you have to take so you basically take all the pieces that you're given about what's being worked on, and you have to hold the whole concept and the big picture to make sure the things coming in are going to, basically they're bringing you these different pieces of the puzzle, and you need to make sure they're going to all fit together for that vision.
Back?
Yeah, I can't count the number of times I've done the same thing with my headphones. It's
right out with my shoe. That was funny. What were we saying?
Oh, I was mentioning, I was just kind of saying it's basically your job is to have the big picture in mind, and as people kind of bring you the different puzzle pieces and the things that need to be fit together, making sure what they're bringing you actually fits together to that full vision.
Yeah, and the other half of it is trying to anticipate problems. You know, trying to see where the roadblocks are going to happen, you know, in the future, and trying to get ahead of those. And it's not just in making the game. There's a lot of marketing and you know, so I get to do lots of cool stuff. Like I get to sit in on meetings when the new CGs are being put together. The CGI videos are being put together. So I get to sit in on meetings with the Blur people in California as they're pitching us ideas, and then seeing that stuff along the stages. And they have to get my okay on certain things, and that's kind of neat. So it's the marketing, and it's the presentation, the public facing side too.
Yeah, and speaking of the public facing side, just to kind of build off that a little bit, how does it feel? I just kind of curious how it feels when like you've worked really hard on this with a huge team, and then like the reveal will come out in January, and you see people responding to that, responding to seeing a little glimpse of High Isle, or in this case, seeing Ascendant Lord just climb up the stairs during the reveal. No one knows that's even an Ascendant Lord, and just kind of seeing how the community responds to this like artistic vision for the first time. How does that feel? I'm just kind of curious because that seems like it'd be a pretty exciting moment for you and the whole team.
It's tremendously gratifying. The most fun part is usually because a good portion of the fans have figured it out, or at least figured out bits and pieces of it, because we drop hints in dungeons about where we might be going next. There's usually a cleverly veiled hint in the chapter for where we're going, or in the DLC for where we're going next year in the chapter. And there are data data leaks as well, and people data mine to find stuff out. And so for all we do to try to protect that information, when it does come out in little drips and drabs, and the various fan communities have kind of started to piece it together, and occasionally you'll come across a post where they have nailed it 100%. They got it. I knew it's gonna be the Sistress Isles. It'll be the High Isle. It'll be this. It'll be a thing with the Bretons, and nailed it. And you kind of like earmark that and go, wow, that person is going to be super happy when the video drops because they absolutely got it right. That's fun.
Yeah, I think this time I try to avoid the data mines. There's a lot of us content creators and community people who were debating back and forth because we knew it was just going to be a race fan export, and there's a lot of people who were like, it's Bretons for sure, and there's a lot of people who are like, nah, it's the Red Guards. So
yeah, I certainly don't condone the data mining, but it's an unavoidable part of having a live game. We can't dump all the information all at once.
Right.
We work on it half a year in advance, and some of it's gonna make its way into the build, in the deep dark recesses of the build. So we do our best to keep that information as close to our vest as we can, but we can't be perfect with it. And so it's kind of part of the game, the meta game of making games is trying to keep that information and kind of being delighted when people figure it out, even though they've only have little bits and pieces of clues all over the place. It's part of the fun.
Yeah, that's what makes things like people who get into like murder mysteries and alternate reality games. So it's an aspect of gaming that people enjoy. So it's cool that it's kind of like, might not condone it, but it's still, it's part of the community and still kind of embraced, and that people also get to have their excitement in that way. So I want to talk a little bit about the players, in fact, actually. So someone who, is the director of the world that we play in, how do you feel about how the artistic side has evolved from the community? And what I mean is the community taking the building blocks in terms of like housing and fashion and motifs, and like the way they've expanded to like full scale communities built just around housing. I myself run fashion shows monthly in a house that we've put together that has a runway because there's all of these artistic building blocks. So I'm just curious how you feel about like the community's artistic expression using like the tools and designs and like pieces that you've given us.
I love all of it. The housing system would be even more feature complete than it already is if I were running things, with thank goodness I'm not, but I love that creativity and the things that the housing community has managed to cobble together, from the bits and pieces that we've released for them to use, is absolutely stunning. It is art in and of itself. It's entirely worthy of being called art. What they're able to do with those pieces and make these resplendent presentations. I wish we could. I wish we had ultimate resources and unlimited resources to make that system even more expansive. To let animations and more sort of like mechanical kind of things happen in those spaces, so that they could really do whatever they wanted to do. It's so much fun to watch, and usually I get to see it because the community team will send a message through on Slack like, have you all seen what this this house where they built this statue or whatever it is? And it's always beautiful to see. I love it all.
Yeah, from just truly like reimagined designs that are Elder Scrolls inspires to full on Ewok villages and AT walkers. Like what
Hmm.
the people can do is awesome, and I think that's really a testament because like obviously that's been leaned into also because as it goes forward, more and more furnishing patterns come out that are truly these building blocks, and it's wonderful to
We
see
think
that
about that.
embraced.
We think about that sometimes when we're concepting pieces and when they're being built and getting put in game. Like if it's if it's a fixture that's a big flat piece, that's maybe in a material that hasn't that the that the housing community hasn't had its hands on first. We go, oh, that one's going to be popular because they're going to get to build an all new planar surface with a new texture on it. And what are they going to do with it? So it does come up sometimes in conversation about how's this going to be used because it's always going to be creatively, certainly.
Yeah, and like you said, if unlimited resources, a lot of things would be added. But what people can do, even with the existing system, is amazing. I mean, we
Yeah.
talk about it often in our communities. Basically, like, housing, unlike any other MMO that I've played, is like truly like its own. It's not a mini game. It's a game unto itself. You can actually just fully dedicate yourself to adventuring, getting the pieces you want, and building if you want, and have an entire multi years of excitement from the game just from that system alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and kind of just another question along the lines of like the community, because so community is really huge to me, to the people who listen to the podcast, and the ESO community is something that gets talked about a lot. So I was curious if you could talk a little bit about how maybe the ESO community is unique from your perspective, especially as somebody who's worked on a multitude of different MMOs.
Yeah, it's funny when you have worked on MMOs in the past, in Dark Age particularly because it's kind of venerated now. It was, you hear a lot of best PvP that was ever created. Hands down the best PvP game that was ever made. None of these new games touch it and that kind of stuff. And I think back on when we were in the middle of running that game, and that it didn't feel like the conversation was that positive at the time, because people were we were a live game and people were sometimes upset because we were nerfing things, or we had to change mechanics because it was just too powerful, or oh, that is nerfing, but and now in sort of 20 years later, it's become sort of this venerated, almost mythical. I mean, and it's still running. You can still go play Dark Age right now. And it's funny to see people looking back on it and only remembering what they loved about it and not what frustrated them. And so I kind of couch it in terms like the ESO community in terms of that. About there's so many people who love this game very deeply and play it, and there are other people who wish we would do some things differently. But in the end game, on the whole, I'm tremendously proud of what we managed to put together, and I'm tremendously proud that people are loving the game as much as they are, and are still playing it with as much passion as they are this many years into its existence.
Yeah, and that's also amazing. As like I said, we were talking about MMOs that are still being played, like such as Dayok still being played. Found out recently, I didn't know that even EverQuest is celebrating 23 years of existing. So
Crazy, isn't it?
when a community attaches themselves to a world in a game, they attach themselves.
And listen, not for nothing. I mean, I'm not just blowing smoke here, but the ESO community is one of the most friendly, welcoming. Like, I when I play, I don't tell anybody who I am. I'm completely anonymous online, and I am never hurting for a helping hand. I'm a roamer, and I'm a very casual player. I basically walk around in the forests and look at the pretty things. That's I'm not a PvPer, but when I do get into questing and I'm in trouble, like I'm never hurting for anybody to lend a helping hand and say, hey, here's how you do that quest, or here's a better way, or here's a better route. And I think it really is. It's not unique to the ESO community, but it is a major feature of just the people who play this game and how giving and friendly they are to new players. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, it's one of the things that really drew me in, coming from other MMOs, and a lot of MMOs I stayed a piece of time in, or I'd leave, or I'd check out. But ESO is the one that no matter when I would leave, it's the one I come back to, and that's because it feels genuinely like a home. I know I can take 3 months off, 4 months off in the past, or if I had to go away for this and that things I used to have for work, I could come back and the community would still just be there with open arms, ready to go, oh, this is what you missed out on. Oh, that set's not, as good anymore. You might want to look at this set now and things like that, and just be really like day one. And I think people feel that, and then as they grow in the game, they remember that experience they had, and they see a new player, someone who needs help, and they do it, and it kind of just begets this kind of like positive wave. And talking about like when you play the game, obviously you don't let people know who you are, you're just enjoying the game. So I'm curious, when you play, what is the content you gravitate towards? Because you can do everything in the game, but people usually have a few things that really gravitate to.
I do almost exclusively side quests. Like my gameplay style is to walk around, wait for a quest to pop up, and go jaunt off and do it for a little while, and then get back on the road and just walk around. Like it's the most boring play style ever, but I literally just walk around Tamriel, and then if I happen upon a quest that I haven't done before, I will go off to do it. And I listen to every line of dialogue. I go down every dialogue tree. I love the lore. I love the writing. That's kind of what I'm deep into. So that's me playing Elder Scrolls Online.
Don't tell the people who watch my stream that it's boring, because I would say that is 80% of what I actually stream. I'm not a top-end person. I am a quester. I'm a Blackwood came out last year, and before we even did the main quest line, I was let's go meet our old friends and let's meet our new friends. And then we did talk for a half hour after the quest I called the paranormal romance quest, where you help a lady hook up with a ghost. It's one of my favorite quests. And
I remember that one.
Yeah,
if I did it or not.
It's wonderful. The gist of it, though, is she's a failed author and ghost. She seems like a paranormal romance author, and one thing leads to another. And a shirtless, abbed out ghost and her, they have a romantic incursion inside of a ghost world ring. And I'm like, okay, this is full on paranormal romance. There's somebody who many hats ago was an assistant manager at a Borders back when those bookstores were more of a thing. I'm like, I know this, and it's I just love that. I love just like walking around and having like a random encounter. So I love the side.
It's shirtless characters. It's a thing.
It is a thing. Darian does not know what a shirt is either. Yeah.
That scam.
Just from a purely kind of aesthetic perspective, what's your favorite zone in ESO? Not in terms of quest or things, just from a walking around it and enjoying like its aesthetics.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's probably Grotwood, but Somerset I think is a close second, just as far as just like loving the stroll and enjoying the walk through the environment. It's going to be neck and neck between those two. I love green things and I love growing things, and we're obviously, we've done High Isle now, and then there's the DLC that's coming later this year that's got more growing content in it, and it's so when the DLC comes out later this year, that might be my new favorite zone. We'll see how it all turns out, but I'm very excited walking around it right now.
I'm really excited for obviously High Isle and whatever the DLC ends up being, because nailed it in the last big reveal, talking about like we've been to like a lot of like dark places and desolate places. It's since Somerset, it's time to go back somewhere beautiful. And just again seeing the fields of sunflowers and stuff. Sometimes you just need those zones that are a stark contrast to the flaming death of the Oblivion.
And I sometimes feel like I overstate that. Like, we didn't make anything ugly. Like
nothing's ugly. I think Fargrave.
Yeah, I still jump back. I still jump back to Blackreach every once in a while, just because I'm so enamored with how we pulled that trio of zones off, those three biomes in Blackwood off, and I think that's some of our prettiest biome work. But it is dark, and it is kind of depressing to walk around there and just see like all the sort of oppressively drippy. It's cool and it's beautiful, but it had been a couple of years of that, so it was fun to open up and take a breath in the big wide world again.
Yeah, every zone is beautiful. I mean, I still really enjoy, and I know they don't have the textures and all the stuff of the new zones, but like, I'm still a fan of going through Rivenspire. I still think Rivenspire is a fantastic, gothy, wonderful zone. I was happy to see one of the new dungeons actually, be there.
That's part of the joy of the dungeon drops, is because we always use, we draw back upon past years fixture content anyways to build the dungeons out. So it's always fun to get to go back in and let the world builders play with those pieces again and build new dungeons and build new environments with those older sets.
Yeah, and that's really amazing to see. Again, another thing that we like to talk about a lot is there's this big conversation about parasitic content in MMOs, meaning that you introduce all these things for one expansion, you enjoy it for expansion, next expansion you never use it again. And ESO, not just in systems such as archaeology, companions and stuff, it adds to past content, future content, and current content. It has this very synergistic content, but also again that synergistic content does come through in revisiting zones or putting dungeons in those zones and bringing kind of new life and attention to them. And I think it has this whole synergistic feel that there is other MMOs that do it, but there's also a lot of MMOs that kind of stray away from like ever going back to older content. So I love that it gets embraced, and you get, again, archaeology gives you a reason to go back and enjoy and see those zones again.
And there's a lot of the map left to fill out, right? So we've still got places we can go that'll pull upon that older stuff, and maybe we'll get to play around with some of that older stuff in the future. You never know.
Yeah, and that's also a topic in the community a lot is High Isle's already the next thing coming, and it hasn't even come out yet, and people are still like, well, these are the areas left on the map. I wonder
where are they going, right?
It hasn't even High Isle come out yet, but I wonder next January where we're going.
Yeah. It's fun.
And then the other question I kind of like to ask people, because I just think it's a fun question. If you were Jumanji, I mean, if you're just stuck in the game and you had to go live in a zone, is there a zone that you would prefer to like live in?
Oh my gosh, that's interesting. Oh man, I'd probably go live in Southern Elsewhere. Even though it's sort of it's a region of Tamriel that's kind of rebuilding, like they're rebuilding that city and all. I really love the Tenmar Forest, and I love the way that turned out, and I think just living around cat people would be a cool way to go through life, especially artistic cat people. I'm blanking on the name of the village where all the artistic Khajiit are. I wish I could remember it, but that's probably where I'd hang my hat if I could just Jumanji into the game.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful area. Even if you have to contend with dragons, right? Yeah, like you said, the artistic Khajiit. This is a beautiful zone. I don't think there's a zone in Tamriel you could settle that didn't have some danger anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And the dragons, if you just stay away from all those adventurers who always go and try to kill them, you probably do fine.
That's fair. And then to kind of take just a little bit more time to get to know you, the person behind the job. But we like to do that too when we do the podcast here. So it's not just about like, the job and the work you're doing. I'm just curious, like to get to know people better. Like, what sort of hobbies do you have? Like outside of like, obviously work, you're working artistically. This is a lot of work to design the game. You enjoy playing it, but what other hobbies do you have?
When I first started getting into art, I was big into comic books. I had at one time entertained the idea of being a comic book artist. So I still write some stories that have been bouncing around in my head, for years and years. So I do a little writing on my own. Behind me is my art table. I like to, when I'm doing my own art, I do hand drawn ink maps of like. I'm working on one right now. I want to do one for Terry Pratchett's Discworld.
Oh, I love Discworld.
Yeah, I've only read 3 of the books, but I really loved them, and so I thought it'd be fun to do a map of that, that Discworld on the back of a turtle and see what that goes like. So that's the artistic, what I do artistically in my free time. And then there's there's little sketchy projects that I rip off every once in a while on my tablet and kind of put away, and I come back to work on them, occasionally. But that's usually just like super cartoony, kind of like little pun, politically kind of cartoons and stuff like that.
That's awesome. Is that just for you, or do you actually put your art out there anywhere just out of curiosity?
I don't really put my art out there.
Okay.
I do have a Twitter that I have never posted to, or I posted to a couple of times and deleted all the posts. So I do have like my name is reserved on Twitter, but I never posted anything up to it. I don't know. So much of my stuff is like puns based on other science fiction and comic book properties, and my position as an art director on ESO, I don't even know if like it'd be proper for me to post it.
Right, I guess
like,
you do.
I'm drawing other IPs. I don't know if it'd be okay.
Yeah,
I should probably talk to HR and see if they'd be like, yeah, you can post that. Nobody cares.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of other hoops that have to exist there, given the context. I was just curious because that sounds like I love looking at map art and little cartoons and stuff. So I was just curious, but that's awesome that you obviously get to kind of explore different kind of art styles and art for yourself. You've had a long career, in the gaming space. And we you mentioned a little bit earlier, it's like it kind of already covered this question, whereas, originally you thought you were going to go do like typesetting and stuff for like magazines and stuff, and just kind of this just happened to happen. But just kind of thinking about that before, you took your portfolio and just ended up on this path to gaming, is there kind of like a nexus event or something that, if something would have ended up leading you to a different career, do you know where your journey might have taken you?
I don't know. I was also really I'm an animation fan, and I always thought I might want to try to like go get a job at Disney. I had a semester where in college I had like a 1 semester class, which is just like a free form, like you and your professor create your own curricula kind of thing. And my whole curricula that year was putting together a portfolio to submit to Disney to see if I could get into like their animation program or something like that. I still love it. I never really finished that. It just kind of dropped off for me because I got more interested in the graphic design side of things. And when I was coming through school, like Photoshop was really just starting to catch. And it sounds ridiculous to say this, but it was really just starting to become a full-fledged program. The first version of Photoshop I ever used didn't have layers. Like you had a canvas and you drew on it, and that was it. You couldn't separate out layers, and so. Once layers started to come in Photoshop, the real possibilities of Photoshop started to dawn on everybody, and we were using digital layout tools, for magazine layout and stuff like that. I kind of started leaning in that direction because it got more interesting to me than finishing the animation stuff.
Yeah, and it's fun to kind of sometimes think about how rapidly things change technology-wise and how it affects all industries, because while I'm a bit younger than you, I still went to high school in like the late 90s. So I remember going from Apple IIe's when I was in grade school, and phones being tiny, and I delivered newspapers. That was like my first job, to where we're at now, where if you talk to, there's not really newspapers and things like that. So just seeing how far technology comes is such a rapid thing, from like late 90s with like early days of Photoshop, like 20 something years later, just how much things change.
It's crazy. There's an interesting clip out there of Ralph Bakshi, who was an animator and a filmmaker in the 60s and 70s. And if you don't know his work, look him up. He worked on the original animated Lord of the Rings way back in the day, like 78, 79 or something like this. And he's been a maverick animator his whole career. And there's a clip of him online talking at a convention. I don't know what convention it was, where somebody in it's a Q&A, and somebody asks him, hey, it seems like the animation industry is disintegrating right now. Like, it's all falling apart. Like, what do you tell young animators? And actually, the old crusty veteran of the industry, who's been, basically giving the middle finger to companies like Disney for years, about you don't have to do it the Disney way. You can do your own independent thing. And he laid back, he sat back in his chair, and he kind of looked out of the audience, and he said, "You guys don't understand how amazing the tools are that are available to you right now. Like, back in Bakshi's days, if you wanted to make an animated film, you had to get a camera and film, and you had to set up a big, a big multi-plane camera, and you had to draw it all on paper and then Xerox it and ink and paint it. And he's like, all of that's in a box now. There's a box sitting on my desk that does all of that for you. And he just challenged the audience. He said, you don't understand how amazing the tools are in front of you. It's all there for you. Like, go do it. Like, go make a movie. Anybody with a computer can get right now, now I'm talking for myself. Like, if you get a copy of Blender, 100% free software, you can make almost any kind of animated movie you want. You can create content. It's completely free. If you've got a computer, you've got the tools. And he was like, going back to Bashi, he was like, and you guys are complaining about it like you have something to complain about. He's like, you don't have anything to complain about. Go make art. Go do it. All the tools are there. And it really is true. Like, when I was a kid, I couldn't have imagined a world where you could animate without paper, without a camera, where you could draw a comic book and not have to erase anything, right? Like, not have to do it in pencil first and then go to inks and erase the pencils that were under the inks. Like, now there's, you can do all that in Photoshop and with the tools that are available to you and all at your fingertips. I feel privileged to have grown up through those times, and to be where we are now, where it's just anybody who wants to create can create.
Yeah, and I think that's why you see such a boom in the space I'm in with like streaming or YouTube video creation, because people can. Because there's amazing stuff I watch called like liminal spaces stuff, which is basically using Blender to create these like horror movies and making it look like it's found footage from the 80s, and it's all just done on the computer. And also the fact that I'm even able to stream.
Streaming's a great example of that too, because people, it's just people who have great personalities, who have the natural ability to sit in front of a camera and talk and entertain and be engaging and grow a fan base, right, can now do it from anywhere in the country. You don't have to move to LA or New York, to get notoriety and to be good at being an entertaining person. Now you can do it from Poughkeepsie, right? Like, it's amazing times.
Yeah, I'm all the way over here on the West Coast. You're and other people are over on the East Coast. Yeah, and I'm able to get Gina on, get you on, and like this. Yeah, just thinking of the '90s. Like, if I didn't somehow come up in like the radio broadcast space, like, and even then, what's the chances that I get permission to get somebody from my favorite video game to come on and talk, the art of it? Like, it's such a fantastic thing, because my first videos were my home VHS camcorder pointed at my TV for the game I was playing, so I could show how good I was to submit my score somewhere. And now, yeah, you have OBS, which is, again, just like Blender, completely free software that lets you just broadcast and put together videos and go live and stuff. And it's just amazing to see how far it came, and to also, like you said, grow up kind of in it and be there for all the different steps and just be able to like embrace that and see how much there is to embrace.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then another question I want to ask, is just kind of changing topics a little bit, is big focus here on the channel is mental space. I myself am a creator with ADHD, and part of that we like to talk about a lot is self-care. As it's a very involved career, making games. Obviously you hear a lot about things like, crunch, and there's deadlines and all these things. How do you kind of strive, or there's things you try to do, because it's not, no one can do it perfectly, to kind of find that work-life balance, to have like a good support network? Just kind of always curious from people in these high stress creative fields, what they do to like try to find balance, because I think that helps a lot of people who might push themselves too hard.
Yeah, that's interesting. I lean a lot into my family. I have a wife and 2 daughters, and they're, a constant source of new, inspiring joy in my life. It's not all wine and roses, but on the whole, I gain a lot of strength from them. And I'm a big fan of speaking up when you're having a problem, and talking to people about the things that are bothering you. I think we're getting much better about it, in modern culture, but I still think there's too much of a stigma about people just not talking to each other and not asking for help when they need help, and things like therapy and going to see someone who's professionally capable of helping you get through your issues. I'm a big advocate for, and I always tell anyone who's having problems, hey, there are resources out there. You can find them. You go talk to someone. There's no shame in it. It's a healthy thing to want to tell people if you're in trouble and ask for some help. That's very human, and we should do more of it as a people.
I agree. I think a lot of things can be solved with communication, whether it's again with a professional or with people in your life and things like that. And I think that's a really insightful thing, because there's a lot that gets unsaid, and I feel like that leads to a lot of not asking for help, like you said. So I think that's really insightful, and that's great to hear. And another kind of thing, and not in the mental health space, but kind of in the creative space, is as a creative, as somebody who's worked in various creative spaces, we can't always be like off, even on our off time, because sometimes things can inspire us. Inspiration can take. So just kind of curious if there's been moments that you can think of in your off time where something you were doing, something you saw, whether it was out with the family or on TV, kind of like inspired a project you were working on, like one of those like aha moments where you're not even thinking about work, but something happens that just kind of sparks that creative side.
That's interesting. When's the last time something like that happened to me? Huh. I have to think about that. I don't want to give you a BS answer, and just come up with something that's not real.
Oh no, it's fair. And if there isn't anything recently, and
nothing's popping into my head. That's a great question though. I want to think about that for a while.
Yeah. Again, sometimes it doesn't happen. It was just it's something I came up with because every once in a while there'll just be something that happens, and like I'll be like, I need to put this in a notebook somewhere so I don't forget it. Because just something will happen unrelated. I'll be like, that would be very cool for stream.
Yeah.
I just like to ask creative people about that, because sometimes if it hasn't happened in a while, it's not the sort of thing that you just like keep in the memory banks. But if it's something recent, I figure it's fun to ask in case.
Actually, I'll tell you one that's kind of close to what you're talking about, and it's not quite the same thing, but it was a couple of years ago. I got into reading like popular level physics books, like not the equations or anything, but just like just people who know this stuff trying to explain quantum physics to dullards who are not scientists, right? And it's a really interesting subject. Quantum mechanics is this amazing, the way that the microverse, assembles and performs, and how it doesn't sort of adhere to the rules of the macro scale universe is really, really interesting. And I eventually stumbled upon a talk by a professor out in California called Sean Carroll, who talked about something called quantum field theory. And I had never, in a couple of years of reading about physics, I had never heard about quantum field theory before. And I won't bore you by trying to explain it to you, but basically it all comes down to the fact that, and I swear to you, I'm not being pseudo science BSery with you right now. Like this is established science, is that everything in the universe, all the microscopic fundamental particles of the universe are actually vibrations in ubiquitous fields that fill up the entire universe, and they all stack on top of each other, and some fields interact with other fields, and that's how we get things like when you smash two small particles together at the Large Hadron Collider out in CERN, lots of other particles will come out, and it's crazy to think about, because these are fundamental particles that they're smashing together, and when they smash them together and they explode, all sorts of new stuff pops out. It's like saying if you put two oranges in two cannons and shot two oranges at each other, a watermelon pops out. How is that possible? And it's because those fundamental particles are just vibrations in fields, and when you put a lot of energy into them and they smash them together, they wiggle all the other fields that are associated with them. And if you wiggle a field enough, you get a new particle, and that's how a new particle pops out. And I listened to that talk from him, and it clicked with me that we really are all connected in a very fundamental way. I'm not a pseudoscience guy. I'm not a paranormal believer at all. But the idea that all of the atoms and all of the fundamental particles that make up me and make up this table and make up everything around us are vibrations in the exact same field that makes up you and the table in front of you and everything around you, 3,000 miles away from me right now. That was a game-changing moment for me that made me really think about, well, there's creative potential there, and just in keeping that in mind, and that we are really all fundamentally connected in a way that's not just psychic, pseudo nonsense, but in a very real physical way. We are all part of the same thing. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's kind of what you were thinking of.
No, that is the sort of thing I was definitely thinking of. Even if it's not a specific moment, it's a fundamental kind of change in thinking that does end up carrying into the work, and I think that's really great. Just a little bit more, because I do know that we have a hard cutoff today. There was just one question from the people watching, and I thought it was a really good question. And it's just, is there a piece of advice or any advice you would give to someone who wants to start in like animation or art or graphic design and eventually maybe work for a company like Bethesda? I know you talked about your own journey of just kind of taking your portfolio, going out to an interview, and it just kind of ended up connecting with Matt, and that ended up kind of carrying you through. So, and there's a lot of things like that don't have full control, but if there is any kind of advice in your time that you might give to somebody who was interested in that same kind of path.
I have kind of a stump speech for this one, which is, if you go to school for this, when you're presenting yourself as an artist, at least, when you're trying to get a job as an artist in whatever field of art you're trying to get a job in, really it is all about your portfolio. Like we do a lot of interviews at ZOS, and we see a lot of people, and I very rarely look at the school they went to or the grade point average they had. Like, that's important. But really what I'm looking at is their portfolio. I want to see the work, right? And so if you go to school for art, or if you're studying independently and you're not going to school, but you're just doing it by yourself, you're using Blender, or, and you're doing YouTube tutorials and teaching yourself this kind of stuff. I mean, my advice is to really think about your portfolio and think about what kind of jobs do you want to get. Seek out people who have those jobs and ask them, what should I have in my portfolio? What are the pieces that an art director, when they open up my portfolio, is going to want to see, right? And really focus yourself on creating 5 or 6 top tier pieces that will supply that portfolio. It's old portfolio advice to say, I would rather see 2 good pieces than 2 good pieces and 8 kind of so-so pieces, but it really is true. Like, you really do live or die on the quality of the work in your portfolio. And so figure out, get good advice from people who do it, and they will talk to you. People who work in the industry will happily talk to you about, like, yeah, this is what I'd want to see in a portfolio for someone coming to me to be a tech artist, or to be a concept artist, or to be, a 3D artist, or an animator, or a rigger, or any of that kind of stuff. Like, they will tell you what you need to do. And if you're in school and you've got 3 classes that are art classes, and in those classes there are 5 projects, pick out the one that is going to apply to your portfolio someday, and really concentrate on that one. Really do your best work there. Pour your time and energy into that project. Don't ignore the other projects. You need to get grades after all. But if you should be thinking about your portfolio, and you should be thinking about what you can present to the people who are going to be across that table or across the Zoom call, evaluating you. And if your portfolio is strong and you show them that you have thought about the specific skills you need for that job, you'll have a much better chance of getting in the door.
That's amazing advice. Thank you for taking the time to share that to anybody who's interested in it. And just kind of on a follow up to that, because I saw a comment kind of about it, as far as being worried about failure or not finding a job. Obviously part of streaming is not art, but it is the same thing, which is if you're focusing and you're talking to people, getting the advice that you need, like CJ said, the worst thing, in my opinion, you can do is being worried about failure. You might fail, but you can't succeed if you don't put yourself out there.
Absolutely. And especially in artistic industries, for the most part, the people in the industry, the ones who are working and and made it in, are friendly and want to see other people succeed and want to have a strong, friendly community around them. If you can find them and talk to them, they will give you good advice. They will point you in the right direction, and do it happily most of the time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that advice. Thank you for the interview. Usually end with a couple rapid fire questions. I know you have to go really quick, so I'm just going to
It's fine.
throw you just a couple out there real quick. One we have on our channel. Do you think a Pop-Tart is a ravioli?
Absolutely not. It is a pastry.
I'm in agreement there, but it is a constant debate. Another debate is...
I see the sides of the debate, but that is not a ravioli.
Another thing that's highly contested in the world, pineapple on pizza.
And not for me, but you do you. Why not? Put pineapple on your pizza if that gives you pleasure. I'm not going to judge you.
And most people answered this one way, but I've had two people answer it different. So which do you pour first, the milk or the cereal?
Oh, the cereal.
Yeah, everybody says cereal, but I've had two people say milk. So that now I just got to ask, because I just can't imagine milk first. But cats or dogs?
Cats.
Cat person. And then finally, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing?
Oh, I don't know. I'm a 7 or an 8. I think I'm okay.
Awesome. So yeah, thank you. I know you gotta run, but thank you from me, from the community, for anybody who watches this on YouTube or listens on Spotify. Appreciate you taking an hour out of your time to talk to us about art and your life and your path there. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thanks again for being here. And make sure you check out High Isle chapter come to ESO in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, have a good one.
All right, bye-bye.
Awesome. I would have asked the lasagna question. CJ had kind of time between things today, so we only had an hour with him before he had to get to another meeting. So I wanted to try to make the most of it. That's why we didn't do a full extensive Q&A. But I did see Cretus's question, and I thought that was a really good question. And I'm glad. Thanks for asking that, by the way, Cretus, because I think ending on that really big piece of advice was really nice. I think not just for yourself, but for, it looks like a kind piece also got some from it. So I think that was a really good question, and one that I honestly didn't think of when I was putting together the interview. So I appreciate you asking it, because I think it was I think CJ gave a really, really solid answer from that. So yeah, a little bit different than normal. Normally we would have more of a Q&A, but sometimes when we talk to people like who have those bigger positions at ZeniMax or other companies, they're, again, High Isle's out in 2 weeks, so I'm sure. So again, also, I'm sorry for not being able to ask about, can we make this a furnishing? I want to know that too. When's this going to be available? Are they going to put that outfit? One of the kind of things when I get these interviews, because they save those for the big Bethesda ZeniMax reveals, is I can't ask. I can ask the questions, but I already know ahead of time the answer is can't talk about it. So I did see the questions, and I wasn't ignoring you. It's just in those cases, the answer is they can't answer, because that's the sort of thing they save for their big reveals. So